Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day. I want to meditate today and I want you to meditate with me today. Meditation is very important and it's very effective. It allows your body to be at peace. It allows your mind to be at peace. It allows you to connect to things in a spiritual way as well. So let's just relax and meditate for a few minutes, okay? And then I'll be back with you. All right? See you later. Yay. Come on back to us now. Come on back now. We got to wake up now. Yeah. So hopefully you feel good. Hopefully you feel at peace on things. Those are your few minutes, and that's something that I always encourage each and every day at some point of the day is to have relaxation, have a few minutes of meditation, have a few minutes to yourself, whether it be in the morning, whether it's before you start your day, at the end of the day, maybe it's at the middle of the day, however you decide, just try to make it a daily habit. And maybe just again 5 minutes and under, and just make it your thing. I think that you would enjoy that. I think that's something to look forward to. And I think it's something that becomes yours. It becomes you, where you're like, okay, I know I'm going to have this few minutes to myself. You can say what you want to say before. You can say what you want to say after. But for these 5 minutes, they are mine, okay? Yay. I also just wanted to kind of like give you a few encouraging words on a few things today. Maybe even leave you with a few spiritual words towards prayer. And so, yeah, if you're interested, stay tuned. If you are out of time, I understand. We'll see you on another day, okay? All right. So those who are still there with me, yeah, good for you. I was thinking about something one day, and I was thinking back to an experience that I had when I was living in Houston, Texas. And this was during the time of the hurricane. And I remember staying in an apartment. It was a nice apartment, at that time. And, I was doing well in my career and everything. And life is in order as it should be, as it could have been. There was a few things that I can remember that were personally going on and even health-wise going on. But what I'm saying is that for the most part, on an average day, everything was flowing as it could. And one day, we get news about, there's a possible hurricane coming. And I know you probably remember and is familiar with the Hurricane Harvey disaster. And for Houston, mentioning a hurricane isn't really just odd, or it doesn't necessarily automatically move you or even scare you, because it's something that when you live in that city that you are facing or up against. And oftentimes it's not always as, it's not always as personal to everybody, meaning that for some people, they will experience, sometimes bad thunderstorms. Sometimes people will experience more than others. So it was not a stretch if they say that there's a hurricane in the forecast for us, okay? Because it's a it's a lifestyle, just like anybody else. California have earthquakes. Certain states have tornadoes. So, each part of the region has its own disaster that they are, you hate to say used to, because you never get used to it, but they are very aware of and know that it could come and, will come possibly. So we felt like everybody else and anybody else that this is a 50-50 chance on everything, okay? So that weekend, I remember everything beginning, and I remember looking at certain parts of town that were getting excessive rain. There was, already reports that certain things were happening. We were already looking at what was going on. And the particular township in the county that I stayed in, we were not immediately affected like that. And so I remember thinking, and what I was also told by someone was that if it did not necessarily affect us by Monday night, by that Monday, then we would, more than likely be good. And we would probably, be able to get past everything. And which I think for the most part, was on schedule. However, if you know anything about life, that's what you think. But again, sometimes life takes you in a different direction. And I remember on that Monday, feeling somewhat kind of calm and everything. It wasn't like, again, just, that type of feeling. And so it was about 6 o'clock that evening. I'll never forget this. I was sitting in my apartment, had the blinds open, and it was about 6 o'clock p.m. And everything just got quiet. I mean, quiet, y'all, like out of nowhere. And granted that my area is a very natural, quiet place. You could hear the birds. You could hear everything that goes on in nature. So, yeah. So anyways, but this particular day and this particular hour was just different. It got so quiet that you could not hear anything. You couldn't hear the street lights. I did not hear cars moving that I normally would have heard on the main street. I didn't hear anything at that point. It was almost like everything just came to a stop. And that's what made me actually get up that's what made me actually get up off of my couch. And I remember walking to my patio because it just seemed so strange at that moment. So I started looking around. I started looking outside to see if I see anybody, to see if something, what's going on immediately. And I know what you're thinking, like, okay, you were already aware of the hurricane, but no, it was just very strange because everything just, became zero. Like there was nothing moving, nothing to be heard, nothing to be seen at that time. And so I went back to the couch and I sat down and continued to watch TV. And I said, okay, I just, go back to normal. And within that hour, at about 7 o'clock, it started raining. It started sprinkling. It started raining. And I said, okay, again, still not really thinking too much of anything because it starts off as a slow rain. It did not stop raining. Yeah. It did not stop raining to 24 hours to 48 hours later. Okay. Yeah. So that started to happen. And even when it first started to rain, and even being in Houston, with my experience of being in Houston, all the time I've lived in Houston, the many storms, the weekend storms that we've had, the many floods, when I say many floods, I mean like as in many, like MINI, like not many as in much, but like small. And but again, this was different. And I expected it to, stop raining at a certain point. But what was happening on this particular day was that the rain was just pouring down. It was aggressive rain at this point. And the water was like rushing in. Not in my apartment, but the water was like rushing down the streets at this point. And it's rushing down into the gutters and everything. Like you could see in my apartment complex where all the water is supposed to drain. Water was just like rushing to those, drainers. And that's when I realized, I was like, okay, yeah, this is different. Like, this is not going to be like a typical Saturday night rain and it's going to rain all night and I'm going to watch a movie. This is not that type of rain. So, at about 11 o'clock that night, my car was already beginning to flood. Now, I'm just going to go back here and recount time. It started raining, y'all, at 7 o'clock p.m. By 11 o'clock, water was over my tires and it was starting to get into my back seat. By 11 o'clock, within 4 hours, a neighbor had went outside and they were like checking cars and everything because, again, we could just see the water coming through. And I remember I remember at one point, like I saw like three people that were standing downstairs and I heard them say, "Oh my gosh, like water is all the way, in this person's back seat. Like this person's car is flooding." And so I went back to the patio real quick to see who car it was. Child, it was mine. Yeah. My brand new car too. I had just bought that car probably about 6 months, maybe a year. I don't even recall it being a full year. That car was brand new, y'all. Yeah. And I was looking and I was like, okay, again, trying to figure out what they're talking about and realize that it is my car that is starting to submerge on the water that they're talking about, because they had flashlights looking, into each person's car, trying to just, make a measurement of the water. Nothing bad or anything like that. They were trying to see what was going on. Well, what had happened is that my car was parked all the way at the end of the parking lot. So it was parked next to where the drains and everything is. So remember when I was saying that water was, rushing and pouring towards the drains. So my car got easily and quickly submerged under the water, as the first person who car that was going to go down. Yes. So at that moment, I went outside and, again, this water now is rushing up on the stairs. This water is coming up on us because you could not even walk outside like with whatever that you was wearing, like, like on a typical day, because this had to be like at the end of August, at the beginning of September, right? On a typical day, you would be wearing what, like shorts, flip-flops, you would be wearing still summer clothes. Well, I had to go and get my boots, and they were my heel bigger boots too. I know the vanity in me, but them were some good boots. They were cute. But those were the boots that were, accessible to me. So I had to put boots on because you couldn't just walk outside in that water like that. You had to, be protected. So I throw my boots on. So I throw my boots on, right? And I, rush outside to see what's going on. And at this point, you can't even actually open my car door. Like I tried to unlock it through the remote key, and no, absolutely no. The water was all the way up to now my driver's door. So all the doors, everything is on lockdown at this point because, this is also one of those brand new cars that's computerized on everything. So it's not happening. And so OnStar is trying to contact me. You can hear OnStar going off. OnStar, they're trying to see if somebody's in the car. They're trying to see, they're asking like, is somebody there? Somebody there? They're trying to see what's going on. So I am trying to talk to OnStar through, basically, a wall, because I cannot even get into the car to let them know that I'm okay and that there's nobody in the car or anything. So yeah, it started to become, very chaotic at that point, in that situation, whereas I started to realize again, just, the seriousness of it all and what's now, happening at this point. And so, so with that being said, I already had made up in my mind at this point is that my car is gone. That is a loss. I'm already coming to a conclusion on a few things in life at this point, because at that point really, what's getting ready to happen. So there's, no need of really just going into a full meltdown at that point. It's just like, wow. And so, I, walked back up to my apartment. And one thing I forgot to say is that I'm saying walk, y'all, like as though you could just walk out here, but really, no. you're stumbling through this water. Like I'm, up against the friction of the water. I'm up against the whole eyes of the water. So we're not just walking downstairs to our cars. Like we are literally fighting, the water, the waves of it all, trying to get to our cars and everything, because the water is now heavy on us. And so it's kind of holding your body physically down to a certain extent. Like you feel heavy and you're trying to, again, fight against something that's going the opposite way. So, I go back up to my apartment at this point, and then again, I've already come to the realization of everything of what's really happening. So at this point, some people, they're trying to relocate to the next floor immediately, because one thing I forgot to say as well is that people were already like being told to go up to their neighbor's apartment. Even like the day before, they were saying like, if you stay on the first floor, try to, locate your neighbors above you, start trying to move some of your stuff upstairs. And which what people were doing, like they was trying to take, their valuable certain things that they wanted and try to help other neighbors out. And so people were contacting and moving stuff up to the second and third floor, which was really, really just grace, just grace, because grace in a good way, because when you just really think about that type of situation, and even though that we're in the middle of a disaster, that doesn't mean that people, are going to necessarily open up their home. And so it was just really a blessing for those neighbors who stayed up on the upper levels to say, hey, yeah, you can come into my home, or, hey, I'll take care of your belongings until you're able to get back, or until we're able to figure out the next step. So just, again, glory to God on that situation. Yeah. And so with that being said, guys, I remember, I remember the process of everything at this point, because this is all a process now. And I remember between the hours of 1 o'clock up to about 5:30 that morning, I remember like not being able to necessarily go to sleep. But I know that sounds like very simple, like, oh, you probably wouldn't want to go to sleep because, of what's going on. Well, it's really now more so of a thing of like a waiting period. And this particular waiting period that, you're just waiting to see what the next step is, right? And there was nothing at that point between those hours that could be done. And that's something that's very important about this story that I always tell people, is that I could talk about, the water. I could talk about other things. I could talk about so many different components of this particular day. But one thing I do concentrate on, and I always like witness to people on, is the fact that between 1 a.m. up to 6 a.m., it was a waiting period. At this point, I think the rain has stopped a little bit, but the water is now rising inch by inch. So water is now rising up on the first floor patios. It's just, it's rising kind of slowly but sure. And that to me was kind of somewhat unsettling to me. And that's really the part that really made me nervous throughout the situation. Like most people, they probably would think maybe the aftermath of everything, or they may think like, during the time my car was being submerged, that's the uncomfortable feeling. But actually what was uncomfortable was not knowing how far that water was going to get up onto my apartment, because I stayed on the upper level apartment. So not knowing if that water could come up that high, because it could, because who was to say that it could not? And actually there was actually buildings in Houston where it's that this was happening, so now there's no guarantee on anything. And so I'm literally setting my clock every 45 minutes to monitor and measure this water, because my biggest fear is that I would wake up to water already in my apartment and wouldn't know what to do or wouldn't have any idea, what's going on, and I would be at a disadvantage. So that's what was making me very nervous, was like, I was just like, okay, would I wake up to water up on me? What would happen, at that point? So I would set the clock again every 45 minutes into increments, to just, watch and monitor everything. And so the apartment management had given us a text message early that morning, somewhere between 4 to 6 a.m. I remember letting us know that we would, need to leave the building. Like, they was letting us know, like the rescue team is going to be here in the morning time. Go ahead, pack a bag, be ready to leave, because now, it is very highly recommended. Now it's like it's becoming an emergency that you guys, are going to have to evacuate out the apartment building. So, that becomes real too, where it's like, okay, yeah, like, yeah, okay. But even with that, it wasn't an easy decision to leave, because this is a little different from like New Orleans and everything. Like, with New Orleans was so aggressive. It was just, beyond. We can't even imagine it, right? At all. It was super aggressive. With this particular situation and where I was at, yes, you have the water and everything coming, but we're not still in a situation where it's that like windows are being busted and that the water is just, now taking over us, second by second. So there's still a moment of quietness within all of this, right? There's still a moment of decision making to be made. There's still a moment of words that we still had the ability to make a decision and not be in such chaos, whereas that we would, be able to know what to do. So that was a blessing as well. Also, I wanted to go back and I wanted to clarify what I was talking about when I mentioned the city New Orleans. The reason why I mentioned the city New Orleans is because of the experience that New Orleans had with Hurricane Katrina. And Hurricane Katrina was on a level 5. It was very massive and aggressive. And I know just from listening to people that it was a different type of day that day. It was, extremely a lot of chaos and a lot of things that were going on that day. And that's not to undermine anything that was going on in Houston or even certain parts of Houston, because even in Houston, our experiences are different and what's different that day. What I'm experiencing is very different from what other friends are experiencing on a different side of town. So yeah, we all have our experience, but strangely, in a hurricane, it's still each to its own in a way. It's still different. It's still a different story for everybody. And that's really what's interesting, because even being in the same city as some of my friends and everybody I knew, what we saw and what we, witnessed were just different things. So that's an interesting part. And I just want to again bring context to that situation as well. So we do make the decision to leave the property and we do get to our destination. And so a few things that was happening in between that transition was the following. There was Coast Guards that were trying to rescue people. There were people in the rescue boats. It was a very interesting day. And it's something that I would have never imagined for myself personally, because it's something that you see in a commercial when you're growing up. You see these recruitment commercials where they're showing this, this scene on something. But then just think about I'm actually in this. Like I'm actually in this is a real life situation at this point. And so you never know where you're going to be in life or at life. So that's my point about that. And again, I do want to go back because I don't want something taken out of context and out of turn. When I say it personally happened to me, I certainly do not mean that in any kind of way of being prestigious, being, oh, I'm different or something was going to be different that day for me. What I mean is that people have different perspectives on things. And so that's the way personally I was assessing the situation of wow, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm experiencing. So that's what I mean by that, guys. I don't mean no trouble on being elite, prestigious, because that actually brings me to my next point, which is the fact that on the day of a hurricane, nobody gives a about your money. They don't care about who you gave charity to, who you was running with. A hurricane don't care about your $1 million home, what you was driving, what organization you in. There is no respecter of the situation. There is no dividing of the situation at that point. Everybody is coming into the same building at the same time at that point, and everybody is at the mercy and the grace of a stranger. And that's something else that I want to, talk about as well, is that ability to be vulnerable and having the ability to give up control is very important in these type of situations, even in your everyday life, into your own symbolism of a storm. When you're in a storm, such as this, you've got to depend on other people. You got to depend on your neighbor. You have to trust your neighbor. You have to trust the people that are at these facilities, these transitioning spots. You have to trust the rescue team in so many ways. You have to trust a lot of people in this process and along the way. So that's something just to think about, even in everyday life, is that it's not good to always be isolated or to, feel that the next person is your enemy. Every person is your enemy and everybody's not your enemy. Most people really are not your enemy, but unfortunately, one bad apple spoils the whole bunch, right? One bad apple, allows us to think that everybody's against us, that the world is against us. Not necessarily, but unfortunately, it can make a lot of noise. So I'm not going to lie on that part. I'm not going to say that just one person's negativity does not, make a difference, because it does. But however, understand that making communication efforts and networking with people is very important. In this case, I always tell people, speak to your neighbor even before the storm comes, honey. Speak to your neighbor. You don't have to, invite neighbors into your home. You don't have to be extra friendly. Of course, be secure. But let's stop walking past people and you don't speak to people. Let's stop taking for granted that you don't need that person, because, honey, again, on that day, nobody who I knew that was in my circle that day. Nobody could come across town and say, hey, I'm going to pick you up and this is going to be all over. No. The people who I had to talk to, communicate with, connect with, to understand what the next part of the plan was, where we going, where we're not going, what's happening, what do we do about, FEMA, what do we do about any strategy that comes along with this, was coming through the village that I was living in. And so that's something that I do want to just, point out to people is that do not take all of that for granted, okay? So the other point about the situation while we're, waiting for the rescue teams and we're making this transition is I thought it was interesting on how like the Coast Guards and the National Guards and all these people are here and they're circulating around the building. And all of this just, seems like a commercial. But it's not a commercial at this point. It's really like I am in this, this is for real. Like, wow, So that was, interesting to me as well. Another point to the situation is, there's going to be a conclusion to all this. Right now, I'm kind of jumping from point to point to point because I'm just trying to, point out everything, and I'm trying to just put everything together so I can make a conclusion to you on what my spiritual words and encouragement will be to you today. So that's why I'm kind of jumping around, guys. Another point that I thought about was when a family member told me the following. She said, even if the water does not get up to your apartment and your apartment is okay, you should still think about leaving, because what can happen is the fact that you can get trapped in the apartment. Electricity can go off. Food can be, a desert. The rescue team may not come back to 3 or 4 days later at this point. So it could complicate the situation in a way that you're not expecting. So think about, making that decision to actually leave. And so that was another reason why I left too, is that I had to think about whether something would be more complex or become more difficult by me staying here. And so, think about that. And one thing I also remember in that question is that, because I prayed about it at that moment, I was like, God, do I leave? Do I, what do I do? Do I stay here? Am I safe? All of that. And I remember God basically pointing out a scripture to me, and basically God saying that I will be with you through every step of this. So the answer wasn't necessarily yes or no. The answer was, I will be with you through every step of this. So for me, I took that as that point. I took it as like, okay, I might have to leave my home, but God is going to, again, be there. And He's going to direct and guide my steps throughout this day, throughout this evening, throughout this night, and even throughout tomorrow. Yeah. So, that's just something, to think about. And that's something I had to think about at that time. And so, guys, I say all this to bring it to just, encouragement to you, and just to bring it back to your life is this. In a storm, there's different phases to that storm. There is the quiet before the storm. There is the storm. There is the waiting period. And there's the rescue period. Remember when I said that at 6 p.m., it got quiet out of nowhere, but yet the storm had not come, but it just got quiet. When the storm came, that's when everything became submerging. Like water is coming, water is rushing up on us. Things are flooding, cars are going down, buildings are being taken down. Like now, this is the the chaos of it all. This is rushing waters. This is trying to beat the odds of Mother Nature at this point, right? Then there was 1 o'clock to 6 a.m., 1 a.m. to 6 a.m., which was the waiting period. And that's where is that the storm started to kind of calm down. It wasn't raining as much, but however that water is still there, that water is still rising. That's where it's like there's a monitoring period. That's where we don't know what the next step in decision is at that point. We're just waiting at that point. for the next step and next decision to be made. And then there's the morning. There's the text message and phone call from the apartment management that says that the rescue team is coming, and the rescue team will be here at 8 o'clock in the morning. Have your bags packed and be ready to leave. Yeah. So in our everyday situation, we need to know what part of this storm that we are in, or what part of the decision making that we are in, because I'm not going to say everything is always a storm in life, or I'm not going to put it in such a way of like, a little bit of kind of, I don't want to say darkness, but I don't want to put it as in like that you're always battling something in in that kind of way. I'm going to say that there's times where you are actually in a storm, and then there's times where you are just trying to actually make a decision. But it doesn't always mean that you're in this huge battle at that time. It just means that like you're trying to make a decision. Does that make sense? Okay, so but let's just go back to the storm symbolism, okay? Let's keep it simple, probably. So when you're in this storm, guys, and you're trying to figure out the next step, if you can just try to understand where you are, then that will help you to understand what the next step might be and what step to look towards. So look towards or look forward to. If you know that I'm in a waiting period, I've already seen the storm. I've already seen the, prerequisite of it all. So where am I now? I'm in my waiting period now. And if I'm in my waiting period, that means that now that my rescue is coming. It means that God is getting ready to send his form of a Coast Guard, back down to me. He's getting ready to come into the situation and make sure that I am being rescued out of this storm. And so there's different kind of storms that you can be going through. You can be up against a financial storm in your life, trying to make a decision financially on certain things. You can be trying to make decisions about your health, decisions about your child, your husband, your wife. You can be making decisions, trying to figure out what to do about certain things, such as like mental things, such as anxiety. Maybe you might be going through depression. It's different kind of storms that you can be going through, emotional, financially, and so forth, right? But try to identify where you're at in that storm so that you can make a good decision. Remember when I said that even within all of this, there was times and moments where that there was a quietness, and that quietness allowed me to make a peaceful and logical decision. And what's interesting is that putting those words all into the same sentence. How can I be making a peaceful, logical decision in the midst of a storm? Isn't a storm raining? Isn't water rushing? Yes, it is. But trust me, when you're in God's kingdom and you're walking in God's grace on things, and when you go to seek out God and you allow him to be in your life, he's going to allow you to make a decision at that moment in the midst of all of that chaos, that what you think is going on, when you're being rushed on something, when you're feeling that water is coming over me, my car is flooding, this is going on, that's going on. He's going to allow a few moments of quietness for you to hear and seek his voice out, whereas that you can make the proper decision on what you need to make. So understand that there is a rescue to the situation. Now, within that, I need rescuing. Lord, help me finish this podcast and speak clearly. I'm getting tired. So when God shows up, he shows up as He is needed, meaning He knows what you need. He's going to show up in your particular situation to fit your situation. It's not a one fit all. So do not look to your neighbor, do not look to other people to make an assessment on whether you think God did what He should have done or He's doing what He needs to do. It is your home, okay, that He's going to show up to. And He also has His reasons for certain things. Sometimes within all of this, some things are tangible and you will see it, and some things you will not see it. Some things you will see it immediately on this side of earth, and some things will be a generational thing. So maybe, for example, is that your life changed financially at this point. You were making six figures for a long time, but you're no longer making that type of money. Well, at this point, it could be a situation that life is going to be adjusted at this point for you. So, I can never promise you anything on that. It's not for me to promise you anything on that. That's not my place. But what I mean by that is that you could be in a position where it's now that you're going to make an adjustment. However, God knows that adjustment is worth six figures. He knows that adjustment is worth $1 million. I remember watching this one movie one time where it's that's what the situation was. It's that the family had to make major financial adjustments and things were going to be different. What they learned in that process was that what they gained was far more valuable than what that original paycheck looked like. And because of what they gained, it allowed them to now be generational wealthy. And in their case, they were blessed to be generational wealthy, like literally. And they were blessed to also just have generational wealth through family values and things that they did not have certain kind of bonding over, and things that they should have, been bonded on. They now have that. So they got double their trouble on certain things. So sometimes it's like that, guys. Another example of that is this. Sometimes families will make adjustments on certain things, and you have to come out of that $1 million home, and you now got to go to a new neighborhood. You got to go to a new place. You might be going to a new place and it looks different, but what you will have the peace on is knowing that you can afford where you're at. You will have the peace on knowing that when you come home for the weekend, you are home for the weekend. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that is such a blessing to be actually home for the weekend, and to know that you can spend time with your family. You can spend time, if you're single, you can be by yourself. You can be at peace. You can separate yourself from Monday through Friday. So that's a blessing within a blessing, Yeah. So, I'm just giving you an example on that. Yeah. So, guys, it's time for me to get out of here. And, and we're going to go from there, right? Yeah. So, I'm just going to say a quick little prayer for you. And y'all, I'm a person where I have a sense of humor. So, you have to excuse me. Because I clown. I do. If you're going to come to my Bible study, we drink margaritas and talk about God over here, okay? So, if you are too serious, I'm going to ask God to take that seriousness out of you for a moment. And I'm going to ask Him to give you some laughter for today, because that's what you need for today, all right? And so we always want to end things on a positive, note and everything, guys. So let's go. Dear God, thank you for this day. Thank you for this hour, Lord. It was not promised to us. And so we just thank you for everything you have done and you will do for us, Lord. Lord, we just ask that you just watch over us, protect us, just keep us in your spirit, Lord. Guide our decisions every day, Lord. Tell us, where we should be, where we should not be, Lord. Give us a, spirit of understanding, Lord, on certain things. And when we don't know when we don't understand certain things, just, let us know that you are there still within our hearts. You are still here within our homes, Lord. So we just ask that you bless our homes and just continue to bless us, Lord. And so, yeah, there we go. So I didn't clown, but I can though. So, yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, guys, I hope you have a great weekend. Have a great day, and I will see you on the next podcast. All right, bye. But the other thing I was gonna really say is God, bless us on some new rent prices. Lower those rent prices. Lower those egg prices, Lord. We is on this number 15 too much. We need to get off of this $1,500 for an apartment. We need to get off of this $15 for eggs, Lord. We need a new number, Lord. I like the number 3. Yeah, I like $3 for eggs. I like $1,300 for rent. Let's get on that number, Lord. Just bless us this year, Lord. I know we're in the number 5, 2025, but can we make some adjustments on that? Give us some $1,300 rent, some $3 eggs. That's what we need, Lord. In the name of Jesus, amen. Bye.